Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the fourth day of the preliminary stage of the first tournament in the 2022 Meltwater Champions Chess Tour. No, I did not recite that before I hit the play button, but here we are. Today we are going to see who makes it to the knockout portion of this event. It is about a race between 10 and 11 players. The top is really a runaway at this point, unless Jan Nepomniachtchi falls off his train and also gets run over by one. Not like actually, I mean metaphorically speaking from the chess perspective. But I highly doubt that happens. But I will show you some of the games and we are going to have a great time. And we are going to kick things off with the game between Eric Hansen and Jan Nepomniachtchi himself. Now obviously Eric is on a tier, he's tied for second place. And also at the end of today's recap, there actually will be a link in the description. I have just been very bad. I've had a lot of brain fog the past week. Of taking care of the new puppy has honestly been pretty brutal. I've not gotten much sleep at all, and my brain is quite fried. So we have a Sicilian defense. I mean, Jan is a guy who really dabbles quite a bit in the Sicilians, and Eric goes for an anti-Sicilian. And G3 is very good. It's very decent, only against E6. You can't really play G3 against the Sicilians with D6 because I mean, I don't know. They're just not really that good. This bishop can come to G4 and, you know, you don't, it's just, I don't know. I'm actually trying to sit here and think of the exact reason why, but it's just far more common to play G3 because here your bishop can't really come out this way and B6 is just not very good. Here white can even go back to a D4. So anyway, that aside, here play can develop in a variety of ways. Jan attacks the center immediately. I apologize. He plays knight f6, then he attacks the center immediately. And white can either reinforce or take. Pushing it also looks fine, but this pawn is a bit overextended. And if you can't support it with either pawn, it's just not, it's not considered that good. So takes, castles, and we have castles on the other side. Now Eric plays b3, so his idea is quite self-explanatory. He just wants to develop the bishop on this diagonal, and actually white has kind of a pleasant position. For example, if black just sort of plays lazy moves, white will at some point probably put the knight on e5. He will have this bishop here with the pressure, and yeah, chess will be played. So Jan drives the knight into d4 immediately. He chooses not to engage in a battle where he is kind of a step behind on the development front. We have a trade, but white is better. And this is perhaps the weirdest moment of this entire game. Like, why would the guy play rook d1, right? Well, he wants to play bishop b2. The problem is that if he plays bishop b2, he just loses a pawn for absolutely nothing. You say, okay, well, why doesn't he play d3? Well, then he hangs a knight for absolutely nothing. So Eric can't really make that much progress here. So he plays rook d1, right? So black plays e5. Now we have bishop b2, bishop g4, and Eric decides to trade this bishop. Now at this point, Jan has sort of solved all his problems. White is never really going to accomplish much with a bishop attacking the queen because the queen just moves. It's nothing special. So Jan begins to try to create some complications. He plays e4, which is a massive commitment because that pawn is just very much a target, and bishop f8. With the idea to put a rook on e8 and a rook on d8. Sorry, that's c8, but you get what I'm saying, right? Here, Eric plays d3, which is sort of everything that he wanted, which is why the rook is on d1, which is why the queen is on e2. He's not, again, he is not playing rook e1 because, well, first of all, d2 is hanging in all lines, so that doesn't make any sense. And there is no second of all. I don't know why I said first of all. So d3. You ever watch Charles Barkley? Charles Barkley, anytime he's listing opinions, will be like, well, number one, and then he never says number two. It's really funny. E takes d3, rook d3, queen b4, and we have the following position. Now, folks, in positions like this, when you have symmetrical material, so queen, rook, knight, bishop, literally, dark squared bishop, same, you look at who has an advantage where, right? Right now, this bishop is worse than this bishop, because if this knight moves, that bishop is super strong. This bishop can't really get into the game. You play g6, I take your knight. So this queen can only be a target for white. This queen actually has some prospects. This king is kind of safe on g2. And that's kind of what Eric does. And Jan here is in a really tough spot. Like, computer is trying to claim that black is okay with queen back to b6 and then queen to a6. Or to play the move c4 to target the structure, and I mean, I don't know. It's very outlandish defense. Jan plays a bit more aggressively. He wants to move the knight and maybe put the rook on f6, or he wants to play rook d6 and trade the rook. But Eric goes to d8, and now we have like serious problems, because in a position of symmetry, Hansen's just taking over. So he goes to d5 with the knight. We have a trade, and bishop e5. And I mean, white just has 3 very high quality pieces, and black has 2. Like, the bishop on f8 is just not, it's not doing much, right? Hansen just very slowly, methodically improves his position, plays h4, useful move, covers g5, also can play h5. So now the pawns are what we call fixed. It's going to be difficult to move these pawns. Jan tries to do it right away and just deal with this problem, but he's already, it feels like, stepping in a bit of the wrong direction. The king is barely surrounded by pawns. Finally, the bishop gets to move, but now you're on the verge of getting mated. And I mean, white's king is just so much safer. And Hansen gives a check, picks up the pawn on b7. Now he's a pawn up for all his troubles. He's also threatening to win a second pawn. And yeah, I mean, just king g3. And he's safe. Jan sacks a second pawn, but folks, he's just down 2 pawns. He's now down 3 pawns. And Eric Hansen stops the locomotive and defeats Jan Nepomniachtchi. It's absolutely nuts. Absolutely nuts. Eric has now beaten Magnus Carlsen and Jan Nepomniachtchi in the same event. What the hell is going on? This dude is having the tournament of his life. This is insane. I mean, I don't know. I can't really say much else. Next game I have for you is between 2 guys who you might have heard of, Magnus Carlsen and Shahryar Mamedyarov. Mamedyarov having a forgettable event. He's not doing that well. I don't remember what place he's in, but he's, and anytime you can beat Magnus Carlsen is good, so he's going to try his best. We have a King's Indian by black. And white is playing a fianchetto King's Indian. So he's playing a system where you have the bishop on g2, g3, bishop g2. Black has like a million systems here. Black can try to push for e5. Black can try to push for c5. Black can also put a knight out to one of these squares and then push the queenside pawns, or play like bishop g4. Shah plays knight bd7. So kind of flexible, not very clear which way he's going to play just yet. Now it's very clear which way he's going to play, because he has played one of those ways in which he was going to play. High-level insights here on the Gotham Chess recaps. e4, takes, and rook e8. And this is standard. Black plays a6, black plays rook b8. It's clear that in the long run, black would like to play b5. Also, you are removing the bishop from his diagonal so that you're never going to get hit by anything. a4 played to prevent b5. a5 played to win the battle for the corresponding dark square on the b4 square. Bishop e3 and c6. So this is one of the more cagey approaches. So Magnus is trying to prevent Shah from getting anything mobilized on the queen side, while playing h3 to prevent knight g4, playing b3 to defend against anything over here. He hasn't played it yet, but I promise he will. How did I know? The center is protected. The forward infiltration is protected. White is just comfortably better, but it is the King's Indian defense, so at any given moment, you might die. Yeah, happens. Knight fd7, rook ab1 gets the bishop off of the pressure here, and maybe b4 in the future if you're ready. We have f4 now. So basically, Shah has arrived with the knights on the queen side, right? He has the knights on c5 and b4. This is exactly what you want, because those are the squares that you are dominating. And Magnus has more space on this side of the board. And if you let Stockfish run, it tells you 0.00, but not in the sense that you should make a draw. It's in the sense that there is still so much to play for, the computer cannot evaluate who is better. So Magnus plays king h2, just a decent move to kind of prepare some sort of expansion. Shah plays h5, so he doesn't want to see g4, but h5 is a massive commitment to push a pawn like this. Rook e2, queen f6, and it looks like Magnus doesn't know what he's doing. I mean, it's like he's playing 2048, boop, 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 sliding all the tiles around to try to combine them into a higher number. But he has an idea. It's very clear what his idea is. Preventing anything from coming here, and also d6 in the future. Knight goes back to e2, bishop c8. Both sides are playing very logically. White is attacking black's weakness. Black is defending black's weakness. Bishop d4. Queen to e7, and Magnus decides to remove the dark square bishops from the board. The interesting thing is Slackfish is not convinced it's that good. Knight d4, though, and maybe f5 in the future, right, to try to... But black could play f5 himself. Black can also play h4, and black can also, I think, even play d5. So black can actually play all 3 pawn breaks here. He can play f5, h4, and d5 to open things up, which is kind of nuts. Shah plays queen f6, and doesn't go that fast. So he doubles up the rooks first. Both sides double up their rooks to the various, attacking spots. But that was the mistake that Schach made. And this allows Magnus to actually get the right consolidation. And basically, whoever lunges first with the right backup is going to win. It's one of these things. E5 finally happens. And it also happens in a moment where Schach he overlooks a bit of a tactical nuance here. It's the fact that taking the knight is hanging. And if you try to play queen e7, your rook is trapped. And Schach might have tried to sacrifice the rook. That might have been his idea. But what he should have done here is he should have put his rook on d7 and maybe put the rook back on d8. Or, and e5 now doesn't quite work because there's no rook to trap. And you can't take because you would hang a queen in spectacular fashion. So, in this kind of odd maneuvering battle, Schach gets his rook locked on e6. I suppose he did it deliberately, but once you lose some material and White's rooks get to infiltrate, once the rooks are in, they're in. And usually one mistake follows another. Knight takes on b3. Magnus gets the locked-in rook on d6. And the game's just, immediately over. And Schach plays here, and now this e-pawn is not even just a defense, it's a weapon. So you just, if f takes on e6, rook d7, king is super weak, knight e4 comes in, and the game ends basically immediately. Here, takes, and knight to e4. If you take my rook, I play knight f6, I win back your rook, and then I just crush you. So two knights just stranded on the side of the highway. Just not doing anything. Wild game. Honestly, very, very complex game between these two. Very, very complicated. And right here, this moment, literally Stockfish wants d5, f5, or h4. I've never seen a position quite like it. Stockfish is trying to say that any of these three pawn breaks would have led to some dynamic play, and all of them are 0.00. They're incredibly complicated. Black tries to soften up the dark squares of White, and Schach just got to his complex position, but was just slightly outmaneuvered, and I suppose blundered e5, or tried to sack an exchange, but didn't realize how good the position was for Magnus. Next game, you're going to be a little shocked. You're going to be like, wait a minute, what the hell's going on here? Eric Hansen twice in one recap. This dude is really on a roll. Yeah, well, let's check this game out. So Alexander Kostyuk here, who's not having a great event, and we'll talk about this after the game. I'll get into it a little bit, but let's just focus on the game. We have c3, we have a Gioco piano and not a pianissimo. So not d3, playing it ultra solid, playing d4, which is one of the main lines. I recommend intermediate players play like this, big fat center. But the reason is that these positions are very nice for White. You have a constant initiative when you're intermediate, and Black needs to really know what they're doing. At this level, they do know what they're doing. They don't take the pawn here. This is a variation where you can take because of this pin, but instead Eric plays d5, takes, both sides castle, and we get a position where White just has a clean bishop pair, and Black has the blockade on the isolated pawn, but White is slightly better. White is definitely slightly better. When you have an isolated pawn, what you want to do is shove it forward if possible, and use the space around it, right? So you have more open lines. Black wants a blockade to trade pieces, create a long-term weakness, which is why, I suppose, he traded both bishops away and did this. Because now, this is under attack, and this is under attack. So Eric decides to grab the pawn right away, and the queen comes back. But the thing is, White is better. There's just no ifs, ands, or buts. White is just better here. And White is better because, not because Black is going to blunder a mate, but because two bishops on an open board are just better than two knights. They're more able to team up with the queen. They're more able to team up even together to pressure a side of the board. The knights are sort of awkward. They can't really plant themselves anywhere forward. Alexandra just has a great position. She slowly moves in with her army. She targets everything. That's the beauty of this queen, right? She can hit everything. Knight b6, bishop, obviously she doesn't want to trade, and she picks up the pawn on c5. So now her pressure is paying off. She's not just pressuring, she's also a pawn up, and she has a 2-on-1 on this side of the board. Knight a4, queen d5, knight takes b2. So Hansen wins back one of the pawns, but his knights are just a little bit spooky. This bishop is going to hit everything on that diagonal. There is an opportunity here for him to trade the queens. He doesn't. He could go for this endgame and just suffer it out, but he chooses not to. Kostyuk brings the queen to the queen side, and Black, just has some very serious problems here. Like I said, this bishop will be hitting 5 pieces on one diagonal. So bad news. So he decides to kind of part ways with the A pawn to try to create a little bit of activity. All white needs here is to consolidate. And what that means is bring the pieces back, don't hang anything, just push your A pawn, and the bishops will do the rest. She begins to do that. She begins to consolidate. The queen is still harassing everything. The king of white is safe, and the game ends in very stylish fashion here. Eric has arrived, but so has Alexandra. Queen takes b8. Almost like how Paul Morphy won the opera game. Queen takes b8, knight takes on b8, leads to a checkmate. Hansen, of course, didn't have to allow this. He could have taken here, and it's actually... What's funny is that in this position, there is queen g8. Oh, no, I'm sorry. There is this and then queen g8. So he could have taken on a2. I suppose he just overlooked something. I guess he overlooked queen takes b8. And it happens. It happens, and Alexandra gets her, Alexandra gets her first win. I think she was 0 out of 10 prior to this. And, you know, this is a weird subject because anytime we see a woman participating in an event like this, she sort of becomes like the spokesperson for female chess. Even though she didn't sign up for that at all, she was invited. Alexandra Kostyniuk is one of the greatest chess players of her era, like, period. She was a women's world champion. She's a gold medalist in, like, every format, rapid and blitz. She's also successful off the chessboard. But her elo is not at the level of the players in this event, and going in, she was a huge underdog. And when this happens, a weird thing occurs. Like, people immediately start pointing at her and saying, or anybody in her shoes, and being like, well, see, dudes are better than girls at chess. Like, there you go. And, you know, girls will never be as... And, like, the people saying this are usually rated, like, 600. And if they're not, they're mentally rated 600. But the other thing that happens is, like, I feel bad... I don't want to show too many games where, like, for example, in the past recaps, where she was, like, losing, for example. And that would be the same with anybody. I would sort of mention it in passing that they're having a rough event or something like that. And the reason I don't do that is really for that reason. People are just terrible. Like, if this was just if this was like a 2450 or 2500, like, weaker male IM or GM, these conversations wouldn't even occur. Like, if you check the pinned comment on my recap yesterday, this has to be said, you know, we got to change our mindset. Got to change our mindset. Like, I am of the opinion that if there was a 2750 rated female, they would be doing excellent in this event. How do we get there? That's an entirely separate conversation. But it is unfortunate when it happens, and it's not really fair, you know? It just isn't. But anyway, you can refer to my response to the individual who commented yesterday. But I did want to show that Alexandra won a game because people were saying that me not mentioning and laughing about the fact that she was having a bad result is sexism, which is, like, too stupid to even read, let alone regurgitate. So, ladies, I got your back. Dudes, hopefully that's not your mindset. Let's move on. Let's have a good rest of our recap, but it has to be said. Anyway, serious time is over. Now it's time to go back to chess. Hans Niemann versus Prague. Prague is like an international celebrity at this point. Every day his stock is rising. The government of India was shouting him out. It was, like, unbelievable stuff. Hans always comes to fight. He always comes to play interesting chess. And he plays the English, and he plays a system that he played a couple of days ago against Yesipenko. This variation here where he plays a3 to prevent bishop to b4. The thing is that in this line, black wants to crowd the center and then play, like, bishop here, and then knight f6, etc. He plays a3, which is fascinating. He doesn't allow bishop b4, and d5, knight c3, and now this is gone, but in some ways, you know, like, black doesn't have a useful tempo. Okay, you play d5, great, you know, good for you. But yeah, I mean, a3 is like a shockingly effective move. Because if black plays knight f6, white will play bishop g2, bishop g5, take, maybe play f3, and actually he does play exactly that. You notice that bishop e7 is played, so bishop g5 doesn't pin the knight. And then in this position, you can still play bishop g5, but we have the following situation, like this. And then h6. Very, very, very similar to what Hans had yesterday against Yesipenko. So, h3. So h3 prevents anything from coming to g4, but it's actually also designed to play g4 for white. He's trying to play g4 as well, and d takes c4 would be met with an overcrowding of the center. So actually white just gets a lot of center space and has a very nice and pleasant advantage here. Prague is not interested in allowing that, so he drives the knight into the middle. Queen c2 hits the knight, and he takes, and now knight d7. So black has backup. He's coming to this square with backup. The problem is that Hans is ready to play g5. He's ready to use that g-pawn as an attacking mechanism. Admittedly, it is very, very risky, and now this allows queen into g3. And this is scary, because you are threatening bishop takes h3, and then you're threatening mate. So it's bad to get checkmated. It's not good. G takes h6, bishop takes h3. Hans is unafraid. Plays rook f2, and he's like, yo, Prague, come and get me. Now here, by the way, it's very human to deal with this pawn and to play g6 or to take. But taking is not so good. You actually open up your king. But here, Stockfish gives -2. In fact, it's even like -2.5. Knight f6, h takes g7, and you just umbrella pawn. And you're apparently just winning. Like, black is just completely winning. You move the bishop, you bring the knight, and you suddenly have 5 pieces in the attack. But Prague plays this, and that allows queen d2 with the threat of a queen trade. That is a threat, because if you get rid of the queen, there is no more attack. Bishop back to f5 attacks the rook. The rook also is able to take on b7. Like, in the middle of all this, this rook is still threatening to get in. So he does, and the queen gets traded. Let's just take a quick breather with the rook coming back to f1. What the heck is going on? Well, if you count the pawns, Hans has 6, Prague has 5, but Prague has so much activity. I mean, he controls an entire open file. That knight on d7 is going to come into the action very soon. Complex position, computer claims equal, which basically means dynamic and unclear. Takes, knight to g5. We're threatening to take. We're threatening this. The h-pawn is about to get an assist. Black's position is looking a little bit critical, and Prague has to decide which way he's going. Does he play knight f6 to defend the center and cover h7, or does he go to b6? All right, he chooses to go to b6. We're about to find out if this is the right decision. Hans plays bishop h3, takes, and obviously knight h3 is an option, but Hans has bad intentions in mind, and his intentions are to play rook f7. He has temporarily sacrificed a piece because the king is being swarmed by these 3 pieces. Rook g7 threatens almost a mate. In fact, it does threaten mate. It doesn't matter which way the king goes, it's a mate with the knight. So, beautiful spot by Hans, and that is actually why the knight had to go to f6, so that if you took, this move doesn't get to the pawn yet. And this is possible. The way it happens in the game is that Hans finds this very nice idea, and this h-pawn survives, and now Hans is in the driver's seat. He checks, he picks up a pawn, he's still a piece down, and that bishop on c1 hasn't moved, by the way. Can we just address this? It's been 30 moves, he just hasn't moved the bishop. Bishop to e1, very fancy move here, by the way. Bishop f4, right here, very fancy move. H takes g8 rook, style points. Doesn't make a queen because it's going to get captured anyway. And now it's about converting the endgame. So he solidifies, he picks up with check on a7, and he's just 2 pawns up. But he still has to be careful because e3 is hanging. He has to find the right way to do this. He goes to f7, and here Prague can take and suffer. Bishop takes e3, rook e3, knight d6, king f4. He also has a ridiculous engine move, rook f8, which is unfindable. Like, if you find that, you're cheating. If the knight moves check, it's discovered check on the king. Yeah, that's impossible to find. So Prague instead marches his king into the middle, but all of a sudden, his king is suffocating. And Prague resigns as Hans wins this game with a crazy, crazy tactical skirmish. I mean, this was just an unbelievable game. These guys very close to competing for a spot. Was Prague. Hans didn't have a great event, but he put on some wild games and got some big wins. The last 2 games that I have for you determined placement in the event. So the first one that I'd like to show you is the game between Vincent Keimer and Lequang Liam. Both these guys are in like 7th, 8th, 6th, 9th. That area, very close together. This is the penultimate round, and we have a very non-confrontational. We have a double a quadruple fianchetto. So we have a X of bishops, nobody committing to the middle, well, until now, and both sides capture. So now we have a kind of a locked structure. Knight c3, rook e8. White plays knight to e5 aggressive and drops the knight back to d3. So we want f3, maybe e4. Black maybe wants c5, putting the knight on e4 himself. There you go. White plays e3. How is Keimer going to actually make progress here? Okay, so he's rerouting. Look at this a5 idea with bishop a6 in mind, activating the bishop. a4 potentially to attack on the queen side. Knight e5. So since the bishop goes this way, the knight now goes for these squares. c5. At this point, Keimer is much better. So Keimer is better, and he's better after this move f3. He has to kick the knight out. And for some reason, he didn't take the pawn. He probably didn't like something, but he decided not to go after the free pawn on c5. I'm not exactly certain what he didn't like. Instead, after knight f4, he went for g4. So he left this as is, and he thought he was just going to go for an attack. But Liam met him right there and bolstered his kingside, but Keimer kept attacking. But now the knight comes to e4, and these knights are so strong. You can train and you can walk your king up, but now black has the option to shred open the middle and try to attack white. But Liam does it a different way. He plays c4. So he tries to attack the queen side like that, and still this looks good because white's bishops are looking a bit suspicious. a4, cb, queen b3, we have a trade. And another trade. Okay, let's take a breath. What the heck is going on here? All right, white's king is safe. He can always back up. He's going to restructure with h3. He's looking fine. Good pressure. Obviously, Keimer's better. Kabam! Uh-oh. The defense is a complete illusion. If you take on g4, queen h4 comes in, bishop d4 comes in. Bishop d4 comes in first. Actually, in fact, it has to come in because the king will move, and then you will lose the rook. If you try to play defense, then I will play queen h4, and you get smashed. Because of black's very powerful bishop on a6. So knight takes g4 is a shocking move. The king has to run away. Here comes queen h4, and just in the nick of time, rotating queen from the queen side, holds everything together, and we go for the next phase of the game, which is the endgame. We have a rook and bishop's endgame where black is a pawn up. He's going to break in the middle. He's going to try to create a weakness and have a pass pawn. If this pawn goes away, black will have more pass pawns. So let's watch Liam try to put this to work. Rook takes b6 is possible, but black will get the e pawn. So now white will get the h pawn, but takes, and it's a battle of whose pass pawn is better. And it's not clear. I don't know. Maybe Keimer is playing this for a win. Maybe Liam is playing this for a win. Rook f8, but here comes f5. So that pawn's 3 squares away from queening. And king comes to d6. Very bold. Look at that. Right in the way of the rook. King is going to have to get out of there. King goes to the middle. Now we have bishop d3. Uh-oh. You left that pawn on a square. It could be targeted. So black might try to win that pawn, and he does. There's no way for white to just hold on to it. And now black is a pawn up in a rook in game. Probably a draw. Probably with best play, a draw, but very tricky. And Keimer here had to be aggressive. He had to play this aggressively. Now, probably he still has some serious losing chances here, but if you put the rook on an active square and don't allow the enemy to do something like this, you can rely on a stalemate. Like, you're kind of cut off here. Like, your king is sort of stalemated. But you can also rely on just checking the king and winning the pawn, right? So you have to be active. And Keimer plays rook a1, and once you lock your rook into a situation like this, you're in big trouble. It's a fundamental split decision, endgame decision. The white king now gets bullied, so he gets pushed around. Rook solidifies the pawn here. At some point, Keimer begins moving, but it's too late. Now it's too late. Black's king is too active, and the king is shouldering the white king away, so he can't stay in front of the pawn. Very instructive. He uses the pawn as a shield, forces the king away, and beautiful technique by Liam. I mean, just honestly great technique. And the way you win here is you make sure your king can get out and the queen can be made. It took him 68 moves, almost 69, but Liam wins a huge game, basically locking himself in. We haven't featured a lot of his games. And the final game of today's recap is a final round battle that Levon Ranyan is trying to do to qualify. So he is trying to, I think he's currently in 8th or 9th place, and Yesipenko is having a great event. So Yesipenko's in like 4th or 5th. He's looking to, no, he's maybe like 6th place, 4th, 5th, 6th place. So very close. We have an e4, e5. So not a similar thing to the Costinu game, but because we have d3, because in that game we had c3, d4. Sorry. Like this, but both these guys castle, h6, and Levon played like this against Hikaru. I don't know if you remember, but Levon played like this against Hikaru, and Hikaru didn't go for a quick knight g4. There was some position where black could actually play knight g4 and basically ask white what he's doing. Hikaru played like a6, bishop a7. It was their second rapid game. Yesipenko, on the other hand, is like slowly looking at what white is doing and going, wait, I don't understand. Why is he letting me play knight g4? This is one of the reasons why rook e1 is so peculiar and seldom played, at least not until different things happen, because this is just always a problem. And yes, you can go back, but that's not what white wants. Levon has to win, so Levon plays rook e2. The thing is that black is not going to do this, folks. I hope you understand. That is not black's idea. Black does not want 6 for 6. He does not want knight and bishop for rook and pawn. White is completely winning here because bishop and knight are active and about. That rook doesn't scare anybody, whereas white has a very powerful bishop and knight. So that's not good at all. Knight to a5 is played. Instead, what black wants to do is get the king out of the way and launch an attack. And when you play h3, sometimes I will play f5 and actually sacrifice. So for example, bishop back to c2, because obviously f5 is impossible. And there are even positions like, not in this specific one, but you can actually sack this knight. Like, this is possible because the attack is so strong. Queen h4, g3, rook, bishop. Look how cramped and congested. What is this? Like, what are we even, are we making a grilled cheese sandwich of pieces? What the hell? What the hell is that, right? Like, that's not what we want. An ice cream sandwich of pieces? No. So black has all these sorts of attacking ideas after knight comes to g4. And to allow this with white is very bold. But okay, he plays knight back to f6. Now, at this point, Levon plays d4, and he's better. Because this was incorrect, I think, by Yesipenko. Something he did here maybe was inaccurate. Because now white is actually very happy. He's got very good control of the center. This knight's sort of stranded. Also, this knight can be used as a target. So Levon's going to take over this game, try to knock out Yesipenko, and make it into the playoffs himself. So he plays d4. We have takes, and rook takes on e4. Bishop e4 looks better, but d5 is very strong. And then you get the center closed on you, and that's not what you want. The difference with taking with the rook, there is no d5 because voila, and you just, it's +7 here, by the way, for white. That's how good the position is. Just by being a pawn up, it's +7. Guess the eval, baby. But bishop f5 is also possible, and at least this way you trade, and you're just chilling. I knocked over my eye drops. Now, I think also here there was the possibility to play this, which is one of the most disgusting engine moves I've ever seen. Giving away your rook, but threatening queen d3, queen h7, and it almost can't be prevented. Just nuts. So he plays rook e1 because he's a human. E takes d4. And now, knight takes d4 is good. Looks nice, but queen f6 is strong for black. And just kind of a good position. Suddenly this knight is coming to c4. So Levon decides to take a moment here and think, like, do I want to take with my pawn or my knight? Or do I want to come up with something else? And he decides to play bishop takes h6. Oh my god. An absolute lightning bolt. What the hell is that? Bishop takes h6. So if you take, I go queen g6 and the game is over. I take with check. What a mouse slip that would be. I take with check, and then I just bring my rook. What am I doing? My mouse slips are insane. What? I just hung the game twice. Rook e6 and rook g6, and the game is over. Rook e6, rook g6, the game is over. Plays bishop takes h6. But suddenly, Andrei Yesipenko goes full-on heavyweight boxer, eats the punch, and comes over the top with a haymaker of his own. And this guy plays rook takes... Whoa! Neither guy wants to engage. So you got a pawn, but I got a knight, buddy. If you leave, I got a knight. You gotta take my rook. You have no choice. And then you think I'm gonna go here. No, queen h4. That move looks like it has no threats. But the threat is very simple. I want the bishop, but without the open king. Where does white move? If white brings the bishop back, which is what he did in the game, it's one thing. If he plays queen d2, I'm still threatening to take. It's not a matter of defending your bishop. My queen is threatening to take the bishop. So you have to move the bishop. So bishop d2 or bishop c1 are possible. He plays bishop c1, and Yesipenko plays d3. And Levon resigns. You say, what, Levy? What? Hold on, I was barely paying attention. Wait a minute, what? Some of these games go over my head. I just watched the recaps because I love your energy. Wait, what? He resigned? I did not think that was gonna... He resigned because if you take, it's check, here, check, and mate on g1 in the next move. And if you don't take, like let's say you play queen d2, then it's check, and you're still pinned, and I'm gonna pick up some pawns, and then I'm gonna bring my rook, and you lose. You just straight up lose the game. Bishop c1 lost the game. Bishop d2 apparently with d3 was apparently you can survive here because your rook is protected. That's the major difference. But to flame out like that out of nowhere is just nuts. Whoa, that came out of we just said Levon was taking over the game. Yeah, I guess just last round blues. It happens. It really does. Sometimes in the last round, your brain is just goes out. Almost like sleeping 5 hours a night because of a new puppy. Anyway, folks, the standings. Jan Nepomniachtchi wins the preliminaries with 29 out of a possible 45 points. Then it's Magnus Carlsen, Artemiev, Yesipenko, Eric Hansen in 5th, Ding Liren, Kwang Liam, and Vincent Kaima, and Aranyan and Giri 1 point out in 9th and 10th place. They got 21 out of 45 instead of 22, which was the 8th place score. Very close. Link is in the description to the tournament. I will see you for the playoffs tomorrow. That's all I have. Get out of here.